Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss topics relevant to developing for the modern web and the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond.
This is the Web Platform Podcast, episode number 92, our little bit delayed Google I/O 2016 recap show. It's taken us a little bit to get around to it, but we actually now have more stuff to talk about because people have had time to give reactions, respond to a lot of things that they have seen at I/O. So hosting today is myself, Danny Blue, and then on our panel we have Amel Hussein.
Hi, everyone.
And Leon Rebel.
Hello, world.
And then also today we have a special guest, Kenneth Christiansen.
Hi there.
And Kenneth, can you just give us your quick elevator pitch, who you are, what you do, what you like?
I like the web. I worked on the web platform for many years, back from Nokia times. I worked on browsers. I worked on the web apps themselves, and now I'm working on web and IoT. So I work for Intel.
No, awesome. Very, very cool. I feel like you will fit in just fine. So, like I said before, we want to talk about Google I/O. It has been a little while. I don't even what we are in second week of June at this point, and it happened back in May. But let's just start from the beginning and talk about the keynote and some of the stuff. What did you guys think of the keynote? Did anything was there anything interesting that was mentioned? Was it left lacking a little bit? What do you guys think?
I think there was very little time dedicated to web technology, which I think it's kind of obvious because nothing is new. Like everything on the web platform happens week per week. Chrome launches every 6 weeks, so there's nothing really new to announce. But it was highly focused on products, which I think is good. We want to know what's going on. What I found a bit different this year is that everything was will be launched at some point this year. So there was nothing concrete that we can get to play with right away. Like last year, where you got Google Photos, we just have to wait and see what will happen.
Yeah, I feel like everything was coming this fall, for the most part. I did think it was interesting that they were focused. It actually felt a lot more like an Apple keynote than a lot of the Google keynotes to me, especially the way that they were talking about what they started talking about Google Home. Which was interesting. I mean, it's Amazon Echo, but for Google, which is not bad. Which is interesting. I think that does show that product space is open. That people are responding to it. I know I have a buddy that has an Echo and uses it all the time, and his kid tries to use it all the time, she's 2, which is also pretty funny. But yeah. So I thought some of that stuff was pretty interesting. Yeah. I want to talk about VR, but I can talk about VR for a lot longer.
Yeah. So I want to echo the sentiment here. It definitely felt more like Apple than your traditional Google, and there's definitely a big shift in coming soon as opposed to available now. And so I think that's really interesting, and in particular I think with Google Home it's kind of highly advantageous because it has all of the Google platform and the infrastructure and all of the users that already come with Google, right? Versus kind of Echo, where people go to Amazon to buy things, maybe to but they're not coming with this full integrated platform. And so I think if I were Amazon, I would be very worried.
Yeah, it's the amount of data that Google have. I mean, their Google Assistant is going to completely blow the competition out of the water because the amount of data, the amount of intelligence they have on all of their users. I mean, even Google now, for years, it's been amazing, the things it kind of comes up with, the suggestions it gives to you. So kind of having all that power behind the Internet of Things kind of style systems is going to be really cool. I'm very excited about that.
But I also think there's a big challenge for Google here is because they need to understand, most of the Google services are launching in the US first, and then maybe in England because they're based on the English language. And what I see in other countries is that they're actually pretty slow at launching these new features. Even Google Now services or search, sometimes it just never appear. It seems like they go on forgotten. And when you have an assistant here where you really need to speak English, they need to look at how do we bring that to other countries where people might not speak English, or where people might speak multiple languages. Because, for instance, today, like, I have to decide, do I want to use my Android device speaking English, or do I want to speak Danish? And you cannot, like, do both. This is not a Google-only problem. I've seen the same with Microsoft. Like, if you buy like Windows 10 in Denmark, it does not have Cortana, and they keep on promoting like everywhere. It's Cortana. It's Cortana. It's just not there for in many countries.
Yeah, we don't even have it in the UK, Cortana. So.
Right.
And,
I felt like a lot of Google I/O was, and this was my first year attending in person, a lot of it was kind of geared towards thinking about the next billion that are going to be coming on the web, right? And so, like, I mean, I agree, like, it sucks that they roll their features out staggeredly and maybe not even to everybody, you know, but it seemed like there was a really big push for kind of, you know, making developers think about, you know, creating apps, you know, for a different type of phone, as well as, you know, creating web experiences for like less than optimal internet connection. And so it really kind of, I think they were really telling developers like, hey, can we stop thinking about this persona of this 4G customer with like the latest smartphone? Like, we're thinking now, let's think about the $33 phone that, you know, with like 2G intermittent internet, right? So, you know, I thought that was at least nice. So forcing people to think more outside of the box of the Western persona.
Yeah, I think that's because you're seeing like the market where it's really growing now is especially like India. Well, there's of course China, but China is a very difficult market to get into. It works very differently, even like the internet. Like, can you really use HTTPS in China, and how to do that? You need to work with the government. India is much easier. Maybe Africa will come later on. So I think that's all about growing markets here. But I think that one of the things that you see with, for instance, one of the disadvantages Google has in comparison with, for instance, Microsoft or Apple, is that they have not been really in contact with end users. Like, they have not been out selling in these countries. So if you look like Apple, they launched like iTunes, and they launched it with all these songs everywhere they go. They really research the market, where for Google it often seems like an afterthought. Like, at some point we might launch like movies in your country, maybe later series. And I don't think they have like a really strict rollout plans. Like, everything should be the same. It should be the same Google everywhere. And I think they'll have to learn that if they want to win this market.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially with, and you know, I guess I'm spoiled in Google stuff just because I am in the United States and I speak English. Like,
and expert developer expert.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That does, yeah. but it's awesome, which is awesome. But I do sometimes, you know, you have to think about, when my first thought is not to think, is this going to react in a different language, but it is. I can definitely see how it's not even a different language, like in different countries. I had, like, Leon, for example, I had no idea Cortana wasn't anywhere but the United States. I mean, I don't use it, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, even a lot of the Google products take ages to come to the UK. Like, it took ages to get Android Pay. We've only really just got it like last month. So, you know, it's kind of amazing, and that must be relatively easy. It must be even obviously, you know, more difficult for countries that speak lots of other languages as well. So it's a shame, really.
Yeah.
I even think that Android Pay, like, UK is the second language to get it right. So there's the US and UK, and you don't have Android Pay anywhere else, I think.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's very interesting to think about. I don't know if interesting is the right word, but it's something that I don't know if it seems like nobody really has like the best solution for, because I do imagine, you know, worldwide rollouts are very difficult things to do. Right. I want to go back to the keynote a little bit. So they did mention a few products. One of the other things that they talked about was they did talk about VR. Well, so first they talked about some stuff on Android and updating their kind of like their the down to the metal graphics. I kind of forgot what it's called. It's called Metal on iOS. Vulkan, yeah. And immediately, as soon as they said that, I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I said the next thing they're going to talk about is VR, because that is one of the only reasons that they did that was for VR. I'm sure not the only reason, but it was pretty obvious that's where it was going. So that kind of stuff's pretty cool. I'm really interested in VR stuff in general, and they talked about a bunch of stuff specifically for Android. But the more VR you get, there's also web VR. So the more VR things you can get on your device, I think the more likelihood you're going to be able to use things like web VR to do stuff as people get more used to it. I was curious what you guys thought, where they didn't announce a device. They announced specs for a device, kind of in a similar way that...
So I think what we're seeing now is the same thing that like Google have had a problem with fragmentation of the Android platform, and they're seeing like OEMs creating their own like VR devices. Like you plug in your phone and you can use it. So there's one from Samsung, there's one from LG, and I think that they want to try and put all of these together and make sure that they don't get a fragmented VR market. So by releasing their own specs, making sure that everything has the right frame rate, etc., that then you can actually promote these apps on the App Store, making sure that they will work, instead of people complaining that Android is not a very good VR-capable platform in comparison maybe to iOS or other platforms. So I think they're doing the right thing. They're going out there, working with the OEMs before the market gets fragmented. But they, as I read later, they will also like launch. Apparently, they'll launch one of their own. Maybe for Nexus devices.
Also, like the Daydream-ready phones, right? So, and I think that they were really pushing that, like, it wasn't just the software. Like, it, they were really insistent that the hardware had to be complementary.
Right.
And so, you want to use Daydream. Well, you have to have a Daydream-compatible device, and for device makers, that means obviously like working within their specs. So I think that they've really thought well about that as well.
Well, I'm curious about how some of those things do work, because Google, this is not the only time that something like this has happened. I mean, even just recently in the video game space, Valve with their Steam machines, which were meant to be, gaming PCs that kind of behaved more like consoles for people that were reticent to get into the PC gaming world because it seemed so big, complicated, and scary. Like you could go to vendor X, Y, or Z and say, I would like a Steam machine, and they would say, okay, this meets the rough specs for a Steam machine. But they also had a problem where a lot of those machines were not created equally. So I'm curious if Google is trying to lock this down a little bit more to avoid some of that other confusion. Because right now you can't go in and say, I would like a Steam machine, because it's which one do you want? And will it be the same thing with Google's VR, where I want Google VR or whatever it's ultimately going to be called, but you can't do that because there's still 5 different ones.
Yeah, so this will probably be some like minimum requirement to be able to access these games on like the Android store, like on the Play Store. And I believe that they gather a lot of experience doing this, for instance, with Chrome OS. So with Chrome OS, they're actually working with OEMs, making sure that they have like the right hardware requirements, etc. And I think they'll update these like year per year, or when people launch like new devices. So there might be like the Daydream capable devices of like last year, and then like of 2017, and things might change. So maybe in the future there will be some games or apps that you can only run on like newer devices.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but so with that, so they mentioned there was obviously a lot of other stuff in the keynote, and I think some of the other things.
Can you talk about Elo? Nobody cares about Elo, the little.
Okay, we could talk about Elo, and what I just want to know what that means for Hangouts. That's really all I want to know.
I think it's Google Hangouts on steroids. They're finally giving it the all the new features.
But Elo is just on. It's just an app, right? You can't use Elo through the web.
It's tied to your telephone number, isn't it? So it's like how WhatsApp started out, and obviously now you can use WhatsApp on web and all those kind of things. But it just feels like it's another chat app. It looks really good, but it's like, Hangouts is everywhere. There's something else everybody's going to have to start using, and I don't know anybody that's using it yet, so I can't really use it, etc.
Well, I think they're trying to clone WhatsApp because WhatsApp did a lot of things right. And something I didn't talk about, but I noticed from like looking at the screenshots, is that you can actually send like voice messages. At least it looked this way. And this is probably something that you don't use in the US or elsewhere. But like my wife is from Brazil. I know people from India, and that's the only thing they use with WhatsApp. Like there's a lot of people that don't know how to type. They're not good at it. They don't know how to spell. You can just press the mic, say something, let it go, and it sends it. So, and I think they're trying to make it really, really easy. The same thing that WhatsApp did. So like, well, it's tied to your phone number. It's like people will be able to find you. It's like it's tied to this phone number. It could be tied in together with the replacement of SMS messages, what's called the RCS, which Google is also investing in. Maybe that gets integrated over time. I don't know. But like I think it doesn't replace Hangout, because Hangout is used by businesses. Hangout works everywhere. But it's kind of solved some of these issues that I have with Hangout. Like someone types me, I'm actually typing on one computer with my friend, and still my other computer starts saying Bing, my phone says Bing, my tablet in the corner says Bing, as well as my Chromebook. It's like there's all these things. Like it seems that Hangout was a product made for like video conferences, and chat was like an afterthought, just like it was with Skype. And I think now they're trying to look at like how do we solve chat? Like let's look at what WhatsApp did right, because it's a major success. Let's look at what Facebook Messages is doing correct, and let's try to integrate all of these, but keep Hangout at the same time, and then maybe over time they can integrate these in some kind of way, or maybe they just like stay as two separate products.
I'd be interested to hear what people think about the whisper and shout feature. It seems kind of, I don't know, interesting to me. So
that was one of the most Apple things that they did. Think about it, because like when they were showing it and like just like making everything enormous. That was the whisper and shout thing, right? Like is that the small text and the giant text? Yeah. But I was just curious because like when they were doing that, I was like, that looks like something Apple would do, because it seems so dumb, but they're like, look how cool it is.
Yeah, it's just like Microsoft MSN Messenger all over again.
But it looked super easy to use, and I can especially imagine people using this for emojis, because like people, they love these small emojis, and now they can make them like super tiny or really big, like depending on like trying to explain the mood. Like, is it a birthday? Like, let's show a cake and make it big. Like,
I think it might be one of those things that seems a bit weird to start off with, but then within like a year, everybody's used to it, everybody's using it, and it's like something that it's just like, what? How did we survive without this kind of thing? Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean that's like the iPad, right? I mean, Steve Jobs managed to sell something that nobody knew what it really was, but we somehow felt like we needed it, But no, I think for me the most exciting things with Allo were really like the natural language and also the image processing, right? So I mean, like, I don't know if you noticed that, but basically someone texting you a photo of food and then just being able to just reply with, do you want to just say yum, since we know that this is a photo of food? Like, do you want to say yummy lasagna, because we can tell this is lasagna? I mean, that's really powerful. And then also, some really nice stuff, I think, with e-commerce integrations, right? With being able to kind of book and buy things within the context of your chat. And I think, like, if I had to pick one pain point about using my smartphone for transactions, it's all the context switching, right? So if I'm chatting with a friend to buy something, and then I have to go to another window, and so now I can I don't have to switch contexts, and so that's a big pain point for a lot of people that are really power users for smartphones. So I think I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I'm not so excited about that, because one of the problems I have is it's like people invented like the user interface, like graphical user interface, because it's actually really, really good at showing like summarized information and interacting with it really quickly. So if I have to like, hey, where's the hotel, or this is the address, and you have to ask all these questions, it takes a long time. I might lose track of what I already know. So I think if they could like expand this a bit, maybe going back to Google Wave, and they might even show like a card instead, like this is all the information. Like, think about the Google Now card, like, hey, this is the hotel, is this what you want? And then maybe you can like tap with your finger and change a few things and then accept. So I think like just talking to like a bot is probably not the most efficient way, and I think it's probably something they're doing because everyone else is doing it, because this might be the new app store. But if you can merge these two, maybe integrate it with web technology, which I love, I think that could be quite interesting.
Yeah, the whole bot thing. I think it's a way for big companies to try and tie people more into their platform. So if you're in Facebook Messenger or some kind of chat app and you want to know the weather, you don't have to go out of that app and get the weather from a separate app. You can stay in that environment, and you need less apps. And it kind of it's trying to monopolize the app market with one app to rule them all, kind of thing. Which could be interesting to see how that goes.
But I can also imagine like you having like 20 different apps that you didn't even know you installed, and suddenly like all the bots, they start fighting against each other, start responding like, oh my god.
That's a movie. I would watch that movie where you just have. Are you serious? That would be awesome. A movie or a comic book where you just have too many bots installed on your phone or your computer, and they start fighting inside. That would be awesome.
I think that's like the story of Toy Story, right? But maybe it could just be like Bot Story.
But I'm also thinking about like security, because like maybe you install like this evil bot and they have like access to what you're doing, and it's not as easy as with a web page. You can actually see the URL. You might not like, it might be an app you installed. Maybe they changed their icon. We've seen that in the Chrome App Store. Like, people actually bought like a great app that people were using, and suddenly they just replaced it with something entirely different. So that's like really, really scary. Like, you could have an app there which you like, and suddenly it pretends to be your bank, and you're fine. You give it your details, and people steal your money. Like,
yeah, I think that's a very, very valid point. I mean, I think like security around like all of this stuff is a little scary, right? Like with IoT and even with Google Home, and I mean, it's I don't know if anybody's really solved that problem well yet.
Yeah, no one has solved it, because it's a very, very difficult problem to solve, especially as these devices are getting out of our face, like they're becoming part of the environment, like ambient computing. Well, then you don't know what's around you and what is tracking you, and it's going to be really, really difficult. So whoever cracks that nut will probably earn a lot of money.
Well, so you even remember it was, I guess it might have been a year ago or so with Samsung Smart TVs. If you were using the voice commands, and those people started getting really freaked out when they were saying, Samsung is listening to everything that you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think people weren't really realizing that it was like, well, how else did you think it would respond to you if you started talking to your TV or Siri or Google Now? If you don't press the button, it has to be listening for you to talk to it. And so people do seem to start being, they're starting to be a little more, I think things like Amazon's Echo and the fact that Google is coming out with Google Home, and I think they even said Apple is probably going to come out with something similar to those, that maybe that's something that people are just getting more used to. They're used to, as you said, like ambient computing. They're just being things around. Yeah.
I think it boils down to trust. Like, you might trust Google, but you might not trust this small company which have made an app which is also listening to everything you're saying. And like I think this is really difficult, and it's really going to be difficult to like explain to people like who has access to what. And you've seen that even like with app permissions, like regular people, they don't understand what it means. And when you explain it to them, they get really scared, and then they don't want to touch anything. So it's really, really difficult. This has changed like on Android now. On the web, it's always been this way. Like when you need a permission, you ask for it, so you have some content, you know what's going on. But like, imagine this with like ambient computing or things going around you, and how long will they be able to listen to what you're saying? Like, when the bot goes away, will it still be listening? Like, explaining that to users is difficult.
It's just a matter of time until somebody hacks somebody's house and chases after them with their lawnmower or something crazy.
Well, I was actually driving. I was driving, and I'm embarrassed to admit this to our European. Yes, we too much driving. But I was driving to work, and I saw an ad. This was a couple of weeks ago for like, don't let your home security be someone else's entertainment or something along those lines. And basically the ad was implicating that people's their own private recording networks are just being hacked, and so there was a company that was basically like, hire us to stop that. And so it seems to already kind of it's already kind of a rampant issue in the US. I mean, there's
Or at least that security company wants you to think there is.
Well, people also just don't. I mean, they don't take the precautions, right? Like they buy a device, they don't change an IoT, and they don't change the default settings, they don't change the default passwords, and they're just accessible. So,
in fact, I remember quite a while ago, there's some kind of Google search you could do, which would find all of these like online home security system portal things. And then, if they'd not changed the default password, you could just log into the house and watch them, stuff like that. So it is, that kind of thing's been around quite a while.
That's what the security company was advertising.
Yeah. Crazy, really. People need to be educated on these kind of things, don't they, so they can prevent issues such as this.
And then people start like installing like smart locks on their front doors.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if I could ever use that. Like I'm thinking like I don't really trust it because I could imagine that if I could like use a key to open it, but like just use like my app or like a phone to actually close it. Like, oh, I forgot to close the front door. I can do it remotely. I think that's fine. But I kind of like to have my key to actually open it.
Yeah. See, I love all that stuff. I would have all of that stuff in my house right now if my wife would let me. I want the doorbell with the little camera in it. I want the lock.
You want Nest. You want like.
I've already got the Nest stuff. Not all of it, but I have a lot of it. But yeah, so you mentioned one thing. So the security stuff is absolutely a thing. There's one other thing, Kenneth, that you mentioned about permissions that I think is because I want to start getting back to some of the other web stuff that they did talk about. But one of the things that I want to mention that kind of seems to be I don't know if it's competing directly with the web, is the idea of Android instant apps. So for anybody that hasn't heard or hasn't read up on it yet, an instant app is something that Android is trying to provide where it feels a lot like a website, where you can get a link and then you tap that link, and then rather than going to a web server and pulling down a web page, it can actually only pull down one part of an Android application. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, cool. Just making sure. But yeah, so I think a lot of that stuff is really, really interesting. What do you guys think about instant apps and how they potentially compete with web apps? And then what you said about permissions, how do you handle permissions in an Android instant app? Or how do you think they should handle that process? Because right now, I think for the most part, you start up an app for the first time and it says, it just asks, we would like permission to all these things, and then you don't read it, and then you press accept and go about your business. But is that how it's going to work with instant apps, or does that interrupt the flow or anything like that? I'm curious what you guys think.
I can try to give like how I see that. I think it's interesting. I think it's good for like native app platform to progress as well. Looking at some of these things that we've solved on the web. So everything like competition is always good. I think it's going to be difficult because like basically they will let's look at some of the problems they have. Like first of all, the Android APIs have not been designed with these kind of use cases in mind. I work on web standards like in the W3C, and there's a lot of things we have to think about with APIs, like how do we make sure that people know what they can do, that the permissions only grant for what they actually make sense, and they don't grant too much permissions. You don't want to prompt people for permissions because otherwise they'll just say no all the time. But I think even Google did a research on the google.com web page with the geolocation. Everyone just says no. I think it was like 90% or something. Or they'll end up saying yes to things that they don't understand. So like I think this is going to be difficult. They'll probably have to redo a lot of like the Android APIs to make this possible. So they'll probably start with a very limited set. That is one of the issues. The second big issue I think is for Android developers. So actually at the conference I was talking to a fellow GDE who's an Android GDE because I don't do Android. So just like trying to understand like what was his thought on these things. And some of the things that he was telling me is that Android developers already have a big issue with library dependencies. So apparently a lot of the libraries that people use come from other companies than from outside Google. I had came from this like payment system they have in the US that they use in the Apple Store. Do you remember the name? Something with S? Square,
right.
I think.
Right.
Square. Oh yeah.
Stripe, probably. Yeah, so some of these, so like a lot of people are using these different libraries, and what we learned on the web is that if you want something to load like immediately, you need to know how to separate your code out into just the minimum dependencies. Then you need maybe to just load the required dependencies, and this means like a major restructuring of Android apps, which is going to be really, really good for people writing Android apps, but it's going to be difficult, and you have to teach this to people who have never thought about this before. Then you probably have to maybe fix things because the web has spent a lot of time on improving even the JavaScript language to work asynchronously, to make it able to like load things really quick, respond to things when they happen. So like maybe some of these things, I know Android developers, they use like a library for that, but like maybe that needs to be really integrated into Android as well. So I think there's a lot of challenges for this to work out. But I think it's good for Android developers, and I think it will make for better Android apps. But I think it will take a while.
Yeah, and just to put some context in for people listening, so basically, to use the Android Instant feature, developers are going to have to modularize their apps, right? So they're forced to kind of re-architect their apps so that they're modular, and then and they have to let the Play Store know like which pieces that can be exposed, etc. And so that's a big shift in thinking, as opposed to kind of just like having everything like loaded, in memory and available on a user's phone. So it's a big shift.
Yeah, and maybe they'll have to end up like doing similar things like we did on the web platform, where we now got service workers, we're getting caching, we're getting streams, and like basically a redo like a lot of the things that we've done on the web for years. We're getting there on the web, and then now they have to do the same. So.
Right, because JavaScript is introducing dynamic module loading, right? HTTP2 and all this, System.js is a nice wrapper around that, with the polyfill around the ES6 module loader. So, but I think don't you think that a lot of the heavy lifting comes from the Play Store, which is kind of responsible for all of this like routing? Because the Play Store has to basically go through major re-architecture as well in order to kind of do all of this dynamic handling, right? Because
the Play Store is as I understand it, is going to host the apps. So
Correct.
They'll probably be on pretty good servers. So instead of with a web app, you deploy your own server, or you use something like App Engine or Amazon Cloud or whatever. This will probably be taken care of by the Play Store. But that's just one part of it, right? You still need to like restructure your app into like very reusable pieces instead of pulling in this giant library. All these libraries that people are already using will have to be pulled into pieces as well. Existing APIs that might have a very big API surface might need to be small into smaller surfaces, so that you don't need to do prompting for permissions for something that might not be dangerous, because like potentially you would use an API that would be dangerous, but if you're not using it, why do that? They might need to introduce things that we're not doing on the web today, but something like tree shaking. We actually look through the code and find out like this piece of like this view doesn't use these methods in this library, so just like throw them away when we package it up. I think like all these things are of course solvable, but it will take time, and it's a big shift for developers.
Yeah.
For sure. And so, Kenneth, you just mentioned things like Service Worker and some of these other new things that are coming to the web, either coming to or are already on the web platform. And Google is now pushing for what they're calling progressive web apps. And now this has actually turned out to be a little bit more controversial than I originally thought it would have been. I don't know if it's necessarily controversial, but with the idea of a progressive web app being, I actually still think it's fairly hard to define. But largely, what they want is it's supposed to be a website that works anywhere. So it's supposed to work offline. It's supposed to try to expose some newer APIs for things like the notifications API, Service Worker. But the offline is obviously a big part of that, and so it's caching, and then also some of the performance benefits you can get from things there. But so there's a lot of stuff out there on progressive web apps. One of the big things that Google put forward is not really a spec, but a guideline that if you want, because one of the other parts is being installable, and what Google is doing now, and I think the Washington Post is an example that they gave, where you have, if you go to the website on an Android device, and I think on your second unique visit, you'll get a prompt that says, would you like to, I don't remember exactly what it says, would you like to install this or something like this. It's a step beyond the normal add to home screen type stuff. But you have to have your app configured in such a way that Google has deemed it something that you should be able to install. So I'm curious what you guys think on that.
It's using Project AMP. I mean, just the AMP is, Accelerated Mobile Project. The Washington Post and a bunch of other publishers are like using AMP to get that done, which is kind of a different initiative, just to be clear.
Right, but just progressive web apps in general, whatever it is that they're doing, there are a specific set of criteria that Google has given for them to consider something a progressive web app, which includes some things which people don't like you have to not show the URL. And you have a manifest JSON file, and there are certain modes that you can put it in when it is quote unquote installed. And one of those things is to not show the URL. And a lot of people really don't like that because it's very un-web-like to not be able to have a URL that you can just send out to anybody. So I'm curious what you guys think about progressive web apps in general, and that specifically.
I probably have a disclaimer. Like I'm a co-editor of the Web App Manifest spec, so I've been working on this for like multiple years. So maybe I should give it like a kind of background. Like a lot of us working on web technologies, we really like when people started making like web apps. Everyone remembers like when like Google Maps was announced, Gmail, and like me personally, I have loved like. I really want to get like these same web experiences, getting the web to mobile phone. But I also understand like when you have a very small device, like every pixel counts. Like because like the screen is really tiny. You want to interact with it like a native app. It should be smooth. You want to be able to do scrolling. When you click something, you don't want to wait for like a spinner. So we've been looking like at all of these things. Like how do we solve these things? One of the really big issues holding the web back was offline. So for many years, even back in Nokia time, people were looking at this called the widget spec. So like Opera implemented that, Nokia implemented it, and it was kind of like a way you like had a zip file. You put all your HTML, your CSS, JavaScript in that, and you would install it. So the problem with that is that it basically took away all the good thing about the web, like discoverability, like the no friction, like it's just like. I have this example. For instance, think about like you want to chat. This is the same thing for instant Android apps. Like someone sends you a link. Hey, look at this. You click. Oh, I have to install an app. Okay. I want to know about my contacts. I don't know even what this app is. Oh, I have to install 100 megabytes. Wait. Finally, it's installed. You open. It shows a cat. It's like, okay. Forget about it.
It's the best app ever.
But this is what's so great about the web is you click, it shows a picture. Oh, it's a cat, nice. Or I don't care. Like, and you can move on. And then if you really like it, if you engage with it, maybe you want it in a tab. Like I have on my Chrome, I have like Gmail pinned, right? Because I like getting back to that app. And we've been trying to put it to the web. So we've looked at this from different sides. So. One of the things I looked at was like with the manifest spec, like how do we configure it to act like an app? Like, can it be like full screen without showing the URL bar? For instance, for a game, you want to concentrate about the game. You don't want to concentrate about what URL it is. Can we lock the orientation? So we got the screen orientation lock spec. Google, they came up with this idea called navigation controller, which turned into service worker. So they talked with other people. I was in the SysApp working group. They were talking to Marcel and said, hey, maybe we should rename it service worker. It can do a lot of other things. So they ended up with this spec like solving like offline in a very, very flexible manner. In something that can be, it's like building on the principle of like the extendable web. Like we don't know all the use cases today, but we should enable other use cases. And I think it's like really good and flexible. It's being extended to support like push messages, all of these things. So with like service worker allowing you to have like offline, with good idea and understanding of how to make like web apps load fast today, with the new ECMAScript features, with like HTTP2 push and all of these things, Google came up with what they call Rail. Now I don't remember what is responsive, something loading.
Like responsive, like something idle loading. I don't know.
Right. So basically, like the app should load in about a second. You should get something on screen, just like Apple did with their apps. Like they showed a splash screen, which looked like the final app, but you got something immediately, so you didn't get confused. Like, what's going on? And start opening another app. Like you get this like quick response. So Google have been looking at all of these things to see how, like, if we want to promote people to have these like apps, I used to call them installable web apps, then they need to show the good things, because otherwise people will just like look at it and say, hey, this is not good enough. So Google came up with these guidelines, which will change over time. And they said, well, we want the apps to be fast. They're actually not really doing that yet, but maybe in the future that will be one of the requirements. Like, it should show something on the screen on 3G within a second. It should be responsive with scrolling. It should work offline, so when I'm in the metro, it won't suddenly show like a dinosaur, like, you know, the offline page on Chrome. And that's basically what they've been looking at. And that's why they made these requirements. And what they've also said is that these are our current requirements. They may change. They encourage other developers, like other browser vendors like Opera, which is also supporting progressive web apps, or Samsung, to do something different. Right now, the rule is that if you visit I believe it is, if you visit the website on 2 separate visits with at least 5 minutes between and within 2 weeks, and it fulfills, like, it has a service worker, it works offline, all of these things, they will like show you a prompt. So this is kind of nice, because one of the big issues we had on the web, which like driving everyone to native app, is that we had these door slammers. You go to a web page you've never seen before and start, hey, please answer this survey, or hey, please install my app, and it's taking up like the real estate of the screen. So Google said the other way, like, hey, maybe we should decide. So, but one thing they did, because if the website doesn't want Google to show this banner at exactly this point, they can actually prevent it. So there's actually an event where you can prevent defaults, and then you can decide whenever you want to show it. So for instance, if you go to Flipkart, which is this like Indian Amazon-like e-commerce website, they do that. So when Google decides, or Chrome decides, now it's time that you're allowed to show a banner, they just show this small icon on the top, I think in right corner. We'll select, click here to install this app, or to add to home screen. And it will like bounce quite nicely, ding, ding, ding. So if you click there, it will show the banner. So I think there's a lot of research going on this area. Sorry?
And I have a question about the banner. So the banner, like, I mean, is it going to kind of be like the SEO secret sauce? Like, are websites going to know what that algorithm is? Like, what is the, like, how many times and in what cadence does a user have to visit my site for me to get a banner to get them?
Yes. So actually, if you looked at Alex Russell's talk at Google I/O, I think there was another talk as well. They announced a product called Lighthouse. So it's on GitHub.
All right.
It will install, like, it's not done, it's like beta currently, but you can install like a Chrome extension. We will test your web page and explain exactly what you need to do in order to show it, which, as I said, might change over time. So this is all about like promoting like good experiences, promoting people to do the right thing, just like what they've been doing with Google search, where I think some time ago they said like, hey, if you show like a door slammer, like, please answer this survey, then we won't consider you a good mobile app, and you'll be downgraded. So I think this is kind of good for the web, and I like it. And it's like it's not a Google thing. Like everyone else can do. Like Opera can do totally different rules. The same can Samsung. And we will hope that Mozilla and Microsoft and everyone else will follow in these footsteps.
Yeah, I completely agree about it being a good thing, because I think, with an app on the home screen, obviously, they were saying that the user's going to expect it to behave more like a native app, which is going to really force app developers to try and get a much better user experience, much quicker and faster user experience. It's going to really force people to think about these to get that higher level of quality in their applications, and I think that's going to be a really good thing for everybody. So totally.
So I wanted to point out something, because you were saying earlier, or some of you were saying earlier, that that Google is looking at emerging markets. If you look at emerging markets, like for instance India, people, they don't know about URLs. They don't understand them. They grew up with a cell phone. They didn't grow up with a computer. So they've always been used to having these icons on their home screen, and the web is kind of difficult for them. So this is actually catering to these users as well. They can get this icon on their home screen. They can launch it every day. It's good for businesses, because people, they unlock their phone and they see the icon right there. People might click on it. The same thing with push messages. If people are not using your service for a while, you might show a push message, hey, there's a new movie that might be of interest to you. You click and you re-engage with the app or with the website. So I think this is really, really good for businesses, and it's making a big change in these countries.
Yeah, and actually, I think you're totally right. And on the same token, actually, I hope we have enough time to talk about app indexing, because I think that really ties nicely into this thing. So app indexing, which I was really just my mind was blown. I was like, how have we not done this already? It seems like a no-brainer. But basically, if a user's, for example, apps can now index the pages of their apps, so that it's actually indexable by the Google search engine, which means that if a user, for example, if I have CNN on my, I have the CNN app downloaded and I'm searching for a news article, CNN, will appear as one of the first few hits, and it'll appear with the icon, and when I click on it, it'll open on that actual page with the correct context. And so now this kind of is how we drive user engagement back into apps. And so, users maybe use 10% or less than in terms of the apps on their phone. They're not using them every day and all the time. And now we can actually drive them to use to kind of re-engage with the apps. So it's pretty cool. And I'm surprised we haven't done that already either. So.
Yeah, well, something similar has been on iOS for a while, at least as far as I'm aware. We've actually used it a couple of times, but it'd be interesting to see kind of how manageable that'll be for apps to maintain that index on the device. I'm not quite sure. I've not done that much reading up about it. How does how does an app developer kind of tell the system that there's this content available inside the app and stuff like that? Has there been any information available on how that works? Because I know on iOS it's an absolute nightmare to keep that information in sync. So the user will do a search for something that's inside your application, and it'll still be there when it's been removed from the app and stuff like that. Has there been any information on that so far?
Yeah, I'm not an Android developer. I was just geeking out about this. I'm not sure if I'm sure there's guidelines and specs.
Yeah.
Same way with, there's guidelines and specs for Android Instant. I'm really not sure. Kenneth, I know you're not an Android guy either.
Yeah, sorry, I dropped out a little earlier, so I'm back, so I haven't really been following. But I'm hearing that you're talking about indexable Android apps.
Yeah, the app index, right? So how basically exposing the Google search engine to app content.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody was aware of kind of how the developers kind of hook into that information, and how easy it'll be to keep the inner app data kind of synced up with the operating system and stuff like that. I was wondering if anybody knew. That was all. I certainly don't. So.
My guess would be that it will work a bit like it does for web apps, right? Once in a while, they might maybe they run the app itself in a virtualized environment, and I can actually read out the strings from Android.
Right.
I would assume they do something like that,
okay.
Because app indexing on even on the web is pretty difficult. They're actually running JavaScript, and I think for Android app, for this to really work well, they'll have to do the same. they'll have to like emulate people like running around in the app, trying to click on what is clickable, and then just like read out like the text strings. And they can do that because it's Android. They have access to the kernel. That they know exactly what is being put on screen of text. So.
Mm-hmm.
Something I wanted to say earlier, which I didn't say, is that you were talking about URLs, and I was trying to explain like why I think it's okay that the URL is not always visible. I wanted to point out that people working at this at Google, they definitely believe in the URL and believe it's very important, and they do have people currently looking at like how they can expose the URL for these apps, maybe with a gesture, in a way that you can, for instance, share your URLs. So you still have like deep linking for these progressive web apps. This is definitely something being worked on.
Cool. No, that's very cool. Yeah, the URLs was not something I expected to not really blow up, but was not something that I expected to see as much conversation about as I did. And you can definitely see where people are coming from.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons was because like Google, they showed some really nice like. Progressive web app experiences at Google I/O, for instance, like the Washington Post. But one of the things that, like, I know that if you actually load that app, it will say like, this is better, and we're working on it. And people just like attack and say, hey, it's not progressive, it doesn't work on the desktop. But well, they did say it's better, and maybe they are working on making it work on the desktop. And one of the things that I understood that people complained is that they actually kind of, as they don't show the URL, they don't really have like deep linking. So they're not really like, you don't have a link to the specific like article, so you could actually copy and share it. So I think some people, they looked at that and go like, oh, if this is becoming the new norm, if you're just emulating like native app and forgetting about like deep linking, shareability, app indexing, this is not what we really want. So I think it's good that we're getting this discussion. We're making that everyone is aware that these are really important things to be solved. And like these early adopters, they do the right thing. But I do also understand that they've probably been rushing these things to get to show at Google I/O. I think the guy from Air Berlin, he said like they worked on it for 3 weeks. So like, hey, they had to take some shortcuts, and that's understandable.
Yeah. I can definitely see that. We're starting to get to the end of our time, but there's still a few things that I wanted to make sure that we covered, especially on the website. So. I think one of the bigger like service announcements, I guess there were, or products or service from Google was what Firebase has turned into. So was it just last year that Google purchased Firebase, I believe?
I think it was almost 2 years, I thought now. Maybe,
yeah, okay. It's been a while. I remember using it. I remember using them before the Google takeover and then or purchase and then after, and Firebase has always been really cool, and so again, for anybody that doesn't know, so Firebase was a like real-time database as a service kind of. So you could configure a database with JavaScript objects, and then there were client-side SDKs for web, Android, iOS, all that stuff, so that you could listen for all of these changes. And they even, they would, created other libraries for, Angular and Ember. So there was Ember Fire and Angular Fire that would actually, boast three-way data binding, where, as soon as something changed, it was being persisted all the way back to the database level, and and vice versa. But so that's how it started. And then I think they added hosting. They're doing a ton of stuff now. It's kind of, I hope that I think it's very impressive. I hope they don't lose some of the stuff that made them really good. And I mean, one of the best things about it was the real-time database and just how well it just worked. It was very easy especially if you were prototyping something, or if you were a startup trying to get an idea off the ground. It was really easy to get going, and also not expensive in the grand scheme of things. So I was curious what you guys thought about everything that's been added into Firebase, and this giant service that it's now become, where before it was, like I said, two things. I think it was the real-time service, and it was the hosting service, and now it's everything. I guess
now it's
almost everything.
Yeah, I'm just having a look now. So this is actually the first I've heard of it, but I knew it kind of back in the days. But I'm looking here. It's like authentication, cloud messaging, storage, hosting, remote config, test lab, crash reporting. I mean, yeah, when I tried it, it was just a real-time database, like you said. Now this looks like, well, wow.
I kind of have like I was trying to figure out because I've never used Firebase, so I kind of want to like learn more about it. But what I understood from people is that it's kind of a rebranding of existing Google services. And I think one of the problems that Google probably have had is that everything seems very Android-like. Like, oh, the Play services is for Android. This is like app, it's Android, it's Android, it's Android. And they kind of want to create like their own like cross-platform services, which will work across the web, Android, and iOS. And Firebase is just like, it is already a good brand. They made a super nice new logo for it, and now they're like tying it. And so like, I think this will just be the new brand for like their cross-platform offering.
But that's already happening, right? They already renamed some Google Cloud services Firebase.
Exactly. This is exactly what they did.
So it's already happening, and I mean, clearly, I mean, Leon, if you were not at Google I/O this year, because if you were, there was no missing Firebase. I mean, they had not only had they added a bunch of Firebase talks like that week, like as the the conference was going on, but they also, it was all about Firebase. Like, how can we tie everything to Firebase? How can you build your web app, your iOS app? There was multiple sessions. I mean, the team was out in full force, and honestly, like, it's a wonderful product. I'm really excited about it. As a developer, I'm excited, and their free version is amazing too. So.
So I don't think that they're tying everything to Firebase. I think they're renaming products to Firebase. So I don't think you should be scared that the Firebase is going away. It's just called like Firebase Database now. And they just have other products. So like analytics for app is called like Firebase Analytics. So they'll probably just have like other teams that just probably change name. So like for developers, they come with one package which is called Firebase. And it consists of all these things that you need to create your apps across platforms, and I think this is what's good. So I think I see this as a branding move more than like now the Firebase team is doing everything. I might be wrong, of course, but that's kind of how I understood it from talking to people.
But it's also strategic, right? Because everything is in one place, and you're now like you have this wonderful Google ecosystem where you can do analytics, your data, your everything. You can do your authentication, your hosting. For God's sake, you can even register a CDN. That I just started a project with Firebase last week. All my SSL, like they did all of my certifications for me. Like I didn't have to do anything. It was just like.
And I think that is great, because I think before this you've had people that have been looking at Google's offerings and saying like, yeah, that's for Android. Oh, that's for the web. But I need to use this on iOS, and it just does one of the things that I need. What about these other things? Then I have to look at other services. So I think like now presenting everything as like Firebase, which is a brand, works really well. And that will allow companies that might not have considered Google before actually to look at Firebase. They don't say Google Firebase, they only say Firebase. And I think this is kind of important, right?
Yeah. I think another problem for me for the Google Cloud platform was it always seemed so incredibly complicated. The online UI wasn't particularly brilliant, and it always to me seemed quite confusing as to kind of what bits you needed and all those kind of things. But looking at this new interface now with Firebase, it looks so much easier to understand kind of what's going on, what you're getting, and those kind of things. And that'll obviously lower the barrier to entry for a lot of developers, and kind of I think it will probably do quite well.
I also think it was a terrible name that scared a lot of people away. Like, it sounds very technical. And I was like, oh, what is this? Like, I'm not doing computing, or am I? I was like, better not look at it.
Yeah, it's all very cool, and Amel, like you said, just having everything in one place is really it's convenient.
As a developer, it makes me happy, and not only does it make me happy, it's delightful to use. The user experience is wonderful. They have an amazing support staff. They have really great developer advocates that are like there to answer your questions. The GDEs have been awesome. Like, it's just been, it's a success story in my opinion, and I think it's great because now people can actually focus on the real value that they're trying to create with their apps, as opposed to struggling with all of this other like scaffolding nonsense. And on that same token, the Polymer toolkit that was announced also kind of really takes care of a lot of stuff for you. There's a really nice new scaffolding app, and a tool, and you get localization, full responsiveness, you get a progressive shell, like all of the wonderful things, to kind of get started on creating your first progressive web app. And I'm actually doing a lightning talk on it next week at the Boston Google Developer Group, so I'm excited about that.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm actually. I was really excited about that announcement where they announced like the purple. I forgot what purple stands for.
I honestly I don't remember either.
Oh, and if anything,
I'd have to look it up.
RAIL stands for, it's responsive, animation, idle, and loading, and that's just the order of order of things that should happen when somebody like loads your app.
Yeah, let me just find what purple stands for again, because
that's what I'm looking for too. I'm trying to figure out what it means. There we go. It push render pre-cache lazy load.
So you have to read out just read it out.
So it's push components critical for initial route, render the initial route ASAP, pre-cache components for remaining routes, lazy load, and create next routes on demand.
Yes. Purple. So this makes a lot of sense, and I have been doing something similar. So this is why I got really excited, because I ran into some things like, I need to fix these things, and then it's like, oh, they just did it for me. So awesome.
Or Google stole your idea.
So the kind of the idea here is that like with HTTP 2, you can like when you send the initial request, you can also say like, hey, I would like these resources to be preloaded. So you can like say these are my like really important resources. Like I need to show something on screen immediately. So this is normally the app shell. Like you want to have like your toolbar. You might want to have your drawer at the side. So you want to show this immediately. This is what your app cannot work without. So basically think about like a native app which doesn't have connectivity, like Twitter. What would Twitter show if there was no like internet connectivity? So they'll probably show like the toolbars and things like that. Maybe the settings. So you push this, you try to show it as soon as possible, render just that, and then all the content, like even the views, the main views, you try to load those lazily. So you can do this with Polymer, and this is kind of nice. This is called import href, which allow you to do that. And I did this myself using like the new app, what's called the app router, which used to be called Carbon Router. And I did so if people they go to this link, this deep link, then you load this view, and when it's done, you just like fade it in. But the first problem I ran into, or like one of the problems I ran into, is that like, well, I have these 5 different views, and they actually share a lot of components. So they might all use a button. One might use an input field, the other one might not. So there's kind of an overlap. So either if you don't have HTTP 2 push, well, then you have to, they call vulcanize, like put them all together, all the resources in one. So you end up downloading the same multiple times. It's also not good for caching, like with Service Worker. Or you somehow need to make like a system that will intelligently know exactly what modules to load and what you have already loaded, and find the intersection. And as what I understood from the Polymer CLI tool is that it can do this for you. It will find out like what are the shared components between these different lazy loaded views, and it will create a bundle version for like browsers that don't support HTTP 2, or like and an unbundled for the browsers that do. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And doing this, they managed to make like a demo application called shop.polymer-project.org, which like loads like I think was in 2 seconds on 3G, and is like super nice. So I definitely need to look at like exactly how they implemented this.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is really, really cool. That was because of course we couldn't end this without talking about Polymer and web components specifically. But the Polymer CLI tool seems really, really interesting. And you're right, the demo app that they showed works remarkably well. I haven't done a lot of testing on it or anything like that, or really dug into it, but just like initially looking at it, it just works really, really well. And it does kind of change the way that people are. Like HTTP2 is a much bigger deal than I think. I mean, and a lot of people are like, yes, HTTP2 is a very big deal, but I think a lot of day-to-day app developers maybe don't even think about it, and maybe they should. And that's with tools like Polymer CLI. They don't really have to, because if you're building an SPA right now, that is what you're used to, is bundling it all together, or maybe you have 2-3 bundles, right? One for your app, one for your libraries, and one for your polyfills, something like that. Where this is, because only make as few requests as possible, but HTTP2 doesn't necessarily make all of that obsolete, but it helps a whole lot, and letting you only download. I mean, and we talked about it with all the way to Android instant apps of only downloading the bits that you need, and that's what a lot of this is trying to do as well. Only download the bits that the user needs right now, so that they can view what they need to, and then like I said, pre-cache everything else that you need in the background if you need to, or start prefetching things. And a lot of stuff is really cool, all to get to that really fast initial run.
Yeah, they've been talking a lot about like they had this hashtag called like use the platform, like just do the thing you need. It's something like I've been saying myself. I know a lot of people that really know the web platform say like, well, don't use any toolkit, don't use any framework, like just do it manually. But I kind of have this idea: if you want the web to work, you need to make it work for developers that actually are out there. And I was reading one of these, like I think Mobile Vision papers one of the other days, and they said that developers are gaining less and less experience. So a lot of people, they really need to something that's easy. Like the web is difficult. There's so many pitfalls, things you can do wrong. And I kind of really like the web to do things the right way. And I like the Polymer approach, because it tries to be close to the web as possible. Like not creating a huge framework on top of it, just providing the bits and pieces that you need, and still doing it in a way that is really, really easy for users. So I've know a lot of friends that are not that good web developers. They tried Polymer and they found it to be super good, like really easy to understand, having like nice encapsulation, because it's basically like web components, and it comes with like really nice components out of the box. One of the things that I had a problem with myself with Polymer is that like loading time was just not good enough. It didn't live up to the
right? Because the vulcanization stuff was a bit slow earlier, right? But have they fixed that problem now? I don't know.
But not just that, because like people, they load, like when you start having components, like you don't think about what you actually need. So I can have like this input field component which can do everything. It has all these methods, JavaScript methods, all these configurations. It works for passwords. It works for whatever. But I might just need a very, very basic input field. So I will still like get all of this in my app. And people, they start like include component, then they stop using the bottom. They don't remove this include line. And kind of it becomes so easy that people don't stop thinking about like the task, like all what they're putting in and what they really need and what they don't need. So
yeah, I think that's almost on the developer though, right? Because I mean, if you're writing modular code, it also requires modular thinking, which means you really have to make sure you have a good separation of concerns, and that's not Polymer's fault. It's most likely the developer.
But here,
I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And that's what I think with Polymer CLI can help, because it could probably look at the code and say, well, you're actually not using these includes, so maybe we should just like strip them out, like doing some lending, or like what they say, like, hey, you are using all these components, but now let's try to be smart for you. Instead of like vulcanizing everything into one big file, because your app or site is huge, has all kinds of different views using different components. So it might end up with like 20 different components or 50, and the view that you actually need is only using 5. So now they're trying to take that away from the developer, making it automatic. Like they will figure out like the dependency resolution and just load exactly what you need. And you just use the tool, like say, like Polymer init element for a new element, and all of these things. So I think this is going to be really nice, and it's something that most developers can actually figure out. They can use it, and then they will understand how to do things the right way. At least I hope so.
Yeah, I was about to say, hopefully so. Well, I think we are absolutely out of time for today. We may need to do a part 2 or dig it something else so we can dig into some of these other things more closely. I know there's a lot of other stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about so far today, but yeah. So yeah, my brain just shut off for a minute, but Kenneth, thank you.
How can people find you on the internet, Ken? And can you tell everyone, you're like the co-creator of Crosswalk too, right? So we probably have all used something that you've like handmade like as well. That's kind of awesome. A lot of apps use that. So.
Well, I can probably join another day and talk about some of these other things. Well, I do have a Twitter handle. It's I need to type that in the chat because I don't think anyone would know how to spell that.
Okay,
let me just do that, and you can share it below the video.
That works. Well, all right. So, does anybody else have any other parting words of wisdom for our listeners? No? All right. That's good. Well, with that, look, thank you everybody for joining us again for another episode of the Web Platform Podcast. Again, this was episode 92, where we talked all about I/O 2016 recap. So thank you guys very much.
You want to learn more about what's coming on next on the Web Platform Podcast? Follow us on Twitter at the Web Platform, or on Google Plus and YouTube at Plus the Web Platform. We also need your help in creating transcripts of the episodes and helping to create open source projects under our GitHub organization. Contact Eric Isaacson at eIsaacson
or Danny Blue at D_Blue. That's DEE_BLOO.
Thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you all next week.